Eddie, we're almost at the end of 2024. A couple more fights to go, of course. But when you look back now, what do you reckon it's been like for you and for boxing?
Best year we've ever had. I mean, boxing's just in a place like we never expected it to be. Obviously, a lot of that down to Riyadh season and his excellency. But I think people stepping up and having real fights. You know, I mean, that's the key. The product's got to be really good. And I think because you're seeing so many big fights in Riyadh season, we know that our shows and the promotional companies around the world aren't going to do shows of the size of Riyadh season. It's impossible because you go skin very quickly. So what we need to do is make sure that all of the fights are competitive. People are getting tested. You're seeing more 50-50 fights. And I think we're seeing that and we're delivering that. And, you know, I think when you look at the schedule that's been delivered this year all around the world, not just from Matchroom and not just from Riyadh season, I think it's been the best year in boxing for decades. And I think 2025 is going to be even better, particularly with February 22nd already announced, which I think most people acknowledge as probably the best card we've ever seen.
If you're a casual boxing fan in Britain, are you and you know you want to go to fights 3 times a year, are you getting a good deal at the moment?
I think you're getting a better deal because I think you're getting more competitive fights. Like I said, like if you want the big names are fighting in Riyadh season, you need to make sure that your big names or your emerging names or your stable of fighters are in great fights and in real fights. So I think you're seeing a lot more competitive fights now. And I think, you know, don't forget, we did also see nearly 100,000 people at Wembley for AJ against Dubois. So, yeah, I think British fight fans, they're in a good place.
If the Saudis pull the plug tomorrow, what happens?
We just resume to what we were doing before. I mean, nothing changes apart from the opportunities for fighters. You know, and obviously the opportunities for fighters are incredible at the moment through Riyadh season. And, you know, we want that to continue, but I don't think they're going to be exiting anytime soon. I think they're going to be more aggressive actually moving forward. But, you know, certainly I think it's going to be an interesting 2024. 5.
All right, let's say they stay in. 12 months' time, what does boxing look like?
I think it just continues to grow. I mean, people talk about boxing's dead, you know, this and that. The reality is more broadcasters than ever want to get involved in the sport. More media than ever want to get involved in the sport. Attendances are increasing, viewership's increasing, pay-per-view is increasing as well. So, you know, it's continuously, in my opinion, improving. And I think that will continue, of course, with His Excellency's input as well.
If you're serious about anti-doping in boxing, do you not need to explain why fighters fail tests?
I mean, when you say about explain why they need to fail tests, I mean, you have to look at the procedure. You know, if you look at the procedure through the British Boxing Board of Control, through UKAD, the British Boxing Board of Control are the governing body of the sport. UKAD are the ruling body in terms of anti-doping in the UK, and the National Anti-Doping Panel are the rulers of everybody in terms of applying a decision. So I think the answer is not really for me as a promoter of a fighter. It's down to the governing body and the body that tests the fighter and also rules over the decision of the fighter, in my opinion, to give that information.
But would people not think better about drugs in sport, anti-doping, if Conor Benn came out and said, this is the reason?
Yeah, but don't you think that's the rule of the governing body? I don't understand. What do you think? I'm the governing body? I mean, that's like FIFA or the FA particularly making a ruling over a player and a chairman coming out and overruling a decision or overriding a confidentiality in a case that's governed by a governing body. It's just, you're looking at me like I'm the governing body. That's the difference.
No, I'm asking.
You should be speaking to the British Boxing Board of Control and UKAD and the National Anti-Doping Panel and saying, do you not think there should be a more transparent decision or showing of what happens during the procedure? So it's not for me to say that.
If Conor Benn came out tomorrow and said, this is what happened,
yeah,
what trouble is he in?
It's a confidential hearing, so that's a question for UKAD. It's not a question for me. I'm not involved in the case. I'm not in part of the governing body. I'm not part of the anti-doping panel. I'm not part of UKAD. You're giving your questions to me because you think I run the sport. That's the difference. No. But you are, because it's not down to me. Why don't you ask the British Boxing Board of Control? Why don't you ask UKAD? Why don't you ask the National Anti-Doping Panel? Because you don't want to do it. You want to ask me. That's the difference.
No, it's not that.
It is. Why don't you ask them?
Okay, I'll ask them.
You have, yeah, but why haven't you? Why during this period this whole 2 years, right, where everybody's just had a go at Conor Benn, or everyone's just had a go at me, when the British Boxing Board of Control had the information at the same time as me, and they make the rules, they're the governing body of the sport, why did you never ask them?
I'm asking. I'm asking.
No, but I don't. No, but I'm just a promoter. I mean, I'm not the fighter. I'm just a promoter. But why don't you ask the people who make the rules and make the decisions? Because you never do it.
At the start, Conor Benn was happy to come out and talk about
But he's
eggs.
not allowed because he goes for a procedure where his lawyers are telling him, if you come out and start saying this and doing this in a confidential hearing, and I see Simon Jordan's, if UKAD can ask for Conor Benn's permission to release. One, they've never asked, and two, the advice to Conor Benn from his legal team is in a confidential hearing to remain there. And after 2 years of battling and 3 cases, you still won't acknowledge that he's been fully cleared of any wrongdoing.
I'm not saying he's not been cleared.
But that's general. The general consensus of the media is, oh no, hang on a minute. He's not been cleared, has he? Yes, the whole case has been heard. It's nothing to do with jurisdiction. There's lots of points raised and put forward, and they've all been considered by the National Anti-Doping Panel, and he's been fully cleared. No ban, no suspension, and effectively fully cleared of, read this decision, of any wrongdoing.
Oh, I'm not denying
I know, but it's
been a mess.
but why don't you? Yeah, of course it's been a mess. It's been unbelievable. You know why it's been a mess? Because when the results were sent to the British Boxing Board of Control, they didn't make a decision. You know when they made a decision? 2 days before the fight. Contractually, the only way we can pull the fight is if the board will not sanction the fight. And they let it go till 3 days before the fight. It also cost me a couple of £1 million. Fine. But the reality is no one's asked them the questions. All they've done is ask me the questions. Like, I'm the governing body. Like, I own the sport. I make the rules. Which is flattering. Thank you very much. But ask the governing body, ask the rule makers, if this happened in darts or this happened in snooker, what would happen is you'd ask WSL or you'd ask PDC. Because they run the sport. And they're matchroom. But we don't. We're an individual promoter that provides the information to the British Boxing Board of Control for them to govern the sport and contractually for them to rule over the sanctioning of a bout. They had the information for months. They didn't do anything about it until 3 days before the fight, when we asked them and asked them and asked them, what are you going to do? And then we just get the play.
Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. Does it happen at the terms Chris Eubank Jr. seems to have agreed to?
Someone's going to have to walk away. Do you know what I mean? So if Chris Eubank don't want to do 50-50, the fight's not going to happen and he's got to walk away. And if Chris Eubank won't do 55-45, or if Conor Benn won't, then he has to walk away. Do you know what I mean? They'd be silly because it's a massive fight and they're going to make a huge amount of money. But ultimately, sometimes that can happen. And it can happen now, especially with a lot of hatred between them. First time there wasn't really the hatred. It was just like, you know, we respect you, we're going to make a lot of money. Now they can't stand each other. But Conor really wants to fight Barrios. And Conor thinks he can win the WBC World Welterweight title, which he can. And there's a lot of legacy behind that, but there's not anywhere near as much money.
I was under the impression that, I mean, maybe Turkey's not been involved, but it was less about splits now and more about, right, you have this much, you have this much. Just won't tell each other, get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't. Conor feels like he's not a world champion. I don't think one's a bigger name, one's not. It's just fair, 50-50, let's get on with it. And then it's like when someone starts saying, oh, he's only worth 20%, he's lucky to get that. It's like, oh no, I've been here before. It's like everyone just loses their head and says, fuck you, I'm not fighting you. So I hope we don't go down that path, but it's very possible.
Have you made a decision about whether to continue working with Conor McGregor?
With who?
Conor McGregor.
No, I mean, contractually, we have a position, obviously, that, you know, I believe that deal we have is up, pretty much. So moving forward, I don't really know. I mean, we'll have to have a conversation, look at it contractually, but obviously it's a difficult situation for everyone and something as a brand and as a corporate organisation we definitely have to look at.
If one of your fighters was in that position, would you let them go?
Irrelevant question, stupid question. I mean, he's not one of my fighters.
No,
he's not in that position. You're just trying to get a line out of me. I mean, it's like, what do you want me to say? I mean, you know.
Okay. Next weekend, Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk. What happens?
For me, I don't see how you can bet against Oleksandr Usyk in that fight. I think he's always difficult to beat, but particularly difficult to beat when he's already beaten. And I think Tyson Fury will have to do extraordinary things to win the fight, but he's capable of doing extraordinary things. Can he do it at this stage in his career? Can he do it next Saturday? I think it'd be a great fight. I thought the first fight was going to be a stinker. One of the best fights I've seen live. So my head would say Usyk, but I really hope that Tyson Fury can pull it off.
Final question, gut instinct, who does Anthony Joshua fight next?
Tyson Fury.